So there's a report coming out that James Baker, who was the FBI's top lawyer during the beginning of the Russia collusion investigation, has testified in a closed session that there was a lot of bias and abnormal things going on with the FBI, beginning of the FBI investigation into Trump-Russia collusion. This is a huge story if it's true. Now, one, as always, we should take a caveat that we haven't seen his testimony. We're only hearing it through Republicans that came out and said this, like Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan. So they're always going to put their spin on it. So we don't know if this is exactly what he said. But if he said anything even close to resembling this, that's devastating for the Democrats and for the intelligence agencies that I've been doing video on video after of all the either incompetence or corruption that they went through. And I've leaned towards corruption the entire time. So some of the specifics of what he said apparently was, he is claimed to have said, let me bring up the article here, that Perkins Coie met with the FBI before the official beginning of the FBI investigation even started. Now, Perkins Coie is the law firm that Hillary's team hired, and they hired them to basically dig up dirt on Trump. They went through Fusion GPS, which was another firm, who then hired Christopher Steele, the foreign spy, and then got dirt on Trump from Russians, which is exactly what they're accusing Trump of doing to Hillary. In fact, oftentimes using the exact same players as I've had. I think the first video I ever did outlines quite clearly, so check that out if you haven't seen it. But with this allegation kind of shows what we all knew that have been following this, is that the FBI was working in cahoots with the Democrats the entire time. Now, granted, they didn't go exactly to Hillary. They just went to her law firm, so it would be the equivalent of instead of going straight to Trump, they went to Cohen, who was his lawyer at the time. The Democrats would be outraged if the FBI was, before Michael Cohen flipped on Trump, if the FBI was going to Cohen and being like, hey, what do you think? We're trying to dig up dirt on, or we're thinking of opening an investigation onto Trump's opponent here. It'd be outrageous, and they'd be right to be outraged. But that's exactly what happened here. So the FBI, before they even open an investigation, goes to Hillary's law firm and it's like, hey, we're thinking of opening this investigation, hashes things out with them, and then they end up using the dossier. They get these FISA warrants, and they never include, by the way, we are working with Hillary's law firm in our efforts to get this information. It's absolutely devastating. I mean, think of the implications of this. You could now have a sitting president, who would have been Obama at the time, have his intelligence agencies go to his party's candidate for president, who would have been Hillary Clinton, to give dirt on to the FBI and the intelligence agency to be able to spy on people connected to Trump and his team and to launch years-long investigations into them. That is unbelievably devastating and corrupt. Now, keep in mind, Watergate's one of the biggest political scandals that have ever occurred in this country. What happened there? We were talking about Nixon's team sending spies in to his opponent's team to try to get information, then coming back, and ultimately what did Nixon is he deleted 20-something minutes of tape where he was discussing this, and that's what ultimately led him into being, he would have been impeached, or he would have been removed from office, so he just resigned. What we're seeing here is worse than that. It's such an exponential degree, because we're actually talking about using the FBI itself as those spies, basically. Instead of just sending like these henchmen, you're actually using the full authority of the intelligence agency, and that FBI has the ability to do things like wiretap people, to send spies. This report that I'm reading now, that I'm discussing, is also in conjunction with the report that supposedly came out that said that there were actually assets that were being used by the FBI that were physically recording people connected to Trump's team. In other words, like whether they were wearing a wire or filming or something, discussing things with Trump's team. Again, this is unbelievable. Now look at this treatment compared to like the treatment of, for example, Dianne Feinstein having a Chinese spy in her employ for 10 years, right? Did the FBI decide to wiretap Feinstein's people? Did they send spies in to try to get information? No, they went to Feinstein and was like, wow, China's sent a spy here. We caught them. You need to be more careful. Here's what we know, right? But instead of doing that with Trump's team, instead of just coming and say, hey, we think Russia's trying to influence your campaign, instead, they decide to go to his opponents, discuss things with them, take that information, draw up FISA warrants, and then spy on people connected to Trump's team, or maybe even send actual physical spies in, as we're seeing with like Stephen Halper and people of that nature. So it's unbelievably corrupt. And this would be a huge story if the Kavanaugh thing wasn't sucking up all the media right now. But this is going to get bigger. Rosenstein's supposed to testify maybe in a week or so. I think I've read that the time frame's sketchy, but he's eventually going to testify. And I would think eventually the documents are going to come out for things like the FISA application, all the notes and texts that were going on between relevant people like Strzok and Page and McCabe, people of that nature. So I think this is going to blow up. And again, it shows what we already do. There was, like, for example, there was stories earlier about Sidney Blumenthal, who was like, he's considered the hatchet man for the Clintons. He's the one, ironically, given the news of today, right, that was out there smearing all of Bill's alleged accusers that the media didn't care about and still don't care about, right? They didn't care about that. That was okay. It wasn't just slight comments. I mean, it was terrible things he was doing to Bill's accusers. I mean, there's accusations that maybe not him specifically, though he's considered one of the people that were the most aggressive, but there's accusations that some of these accusers' tires got slashed, their cat was killed, things of that nature. I mean, it's really bad stuff, saying bad stuff about them, smearing them to all the press. Press went along with it, of course. They didn't care at the time, right? Still don't care. Can't stress that enough, given the Kavanaugh situation. But anyways, Blumenthal was apparently going to people at Obama's DOJ who was then telling him, hey, I heard Trump did this. Hey, I heard Trump did that. That person at the DOJ is then relaying that information to the FBI, and then the FBI is then investigating that. So basically, Hillary's sending her own confidant to tell the FBI, look into this, look into this. They just used the intermediary of Obama's DOJ. Isn't that great, right? Do you see how insanely corrupt this is? Imagine if Trump uses all these people saying, no big deal, right? Imagine how much their tops would blow if Trump decides to do this to his opponent in 2020. Let's say it's Kamala Harris, right? And let's say Trump then sends wiretaps to people that were once in her campaign. Maybe they're not there anymore, but they're able to use that information to see everything her campaign was talking about, all the records, emails, text messages, phone calls, and they're sending the FBI sending physical spies in to deal with her, and they're launching years-long investigation afterwards, right? And the reason for this is he's like, oh, we got some allegations from some paid opposition research we were doing that she's in China's pocket. And she had several people that have talked to Chinese people before, so we were like, hey, we better check into this. Like, these people their heads would explode. How can Trump do this? He's a dictator. This is crazy. But when Obama's intelligence agencies did that, no big deal. And keep in mind, Schumer told us, don't criticize the intelligence agencies, Trump. They have 6 ways from Sunday to get back at you. So we know that these and you can see, again, never forget, all the heads of these intelligence agencies, such as Clapper, such as Brennan, such as Comey, all of them have came out afterwards, and they're all basically either writing books about how Trump sucks or working for CNN or members of the media just constantly bashing Trump. Heck, Comey couldn't even help himself this week bashing Kavanaugh because he hates Trump so much. So all the leaders of the FBI hated him. We're seeing all the bias from the text messages from people like Strzok. And now we have someone who is actually working with Comey, who is the head lawyer that was working on drawing up these FISA applications, saying there was a lot of abnormal stuff going on and a lot of bias to influence this investigation. If it's true that he said that, that should be the beginning of the end. Like, I don't know how you could take this investigation seriously after that. There needs to immediately be, if not a special counsel, some kind of investigation. Perhaps the IG will be on top of this. I know he is looking into potential bias and wrongdoing in the Russia investigation, but there needs to be criminal prosecutions if this really happened. We cannot have a system where the intelligence agency isn't impartial and instead are acting as an arm and a weapon of the sitting president. That is absolutely ridiculous. And this, again, this is going to be a huge story that will be developing more as we go. And I think everyone, again, one of the things I like to try to do is I'm admitting I'm coming from a pro-Trump side, though there are things I dislike about Trump. But even if you don't like Trump, imagine what those do. Maybe you're a Bernie supporter or a Jill Stein or a Gary Johnson or any other third party. Or maybe you like someone like Cory Booker or someone like that. If you allow the sitting president to weaponize the intel agency like this, our elections are effectively over. It would be it's almost, given the odds of what Trump went up against, the entire mainstream media being against him, all of our culture, such as actors, musicians, comedians, the vast majority of them being against Trump, right? And even the intelligence agencies working against him. It's a miracle that he won. What are the chances that it'll happen again? Look, Bernie didn't do so well, right? He got screwed out by the Democrats, right? What are the chances that a third party would ever have a chance? What are the chances that the Democrat you like could get screwed over by Trump? So we should all be against this regardless of political affiliation. It's absolutely terrible, and we need to be able to make sure that we can trust these intel agencies. For crying out loud, they have the ability to spy on your entire life. which is an outrage. They shouldn't. This is another reason that things like the Patriot Act are a bad idea, because we can see that a few corrupt actors at the top could ruin the whole process, and they could, for personal reasons, use this vast, massive power and authority to go after people they don't like. So yet another reason, I think, to get rid of things like that. But this is something that we should all be against, regardless of political affiliation, and we should, as an American people, demand an investigation into this, and demand that that people that use this tool and use this power to achieve their own ends should be prosecuted to the fullest extent. All right, have a good one.